Hello, everybody. My name is Meiser Gwelly, and today we're going to go over the annual training for resident reconciliation and academic tracking. This is a required training that occurs once a year, and everyone is responsible for it, whether you are a program support slash timekeeper or a site director. This is going to be academic year 2021. There's a process that we started in February that has adopted a new SOP, and this is to explain that process. Many of you have already been exposed to this process based on either the quarterly meeting or it's really quite similar to the previous process that we had in place that was covered during a lot of the orientation session. But this is a required course for everybody who is involved from a program support, timekeeper, and a site director. So let's go ahead and get started. So here we're looking at the education SOP procedures for reimbursing, and this specifically relates to University of Cincinnati, but this can also relate to our other two affiliates, both Christ and Children's Hospital. And in fact, there are separate ways to track those, but it's really similar. It's just a different spreadsheet with a different billing day code, and that's really about it. So this is the SOP right here. I'm not going to go over this specific SOP, though it will be available to you, but you can see it really breaks down in two different parts. There's a clinical part, an administrative part, or a clinical part which has an administrative part to it, and then an education part. Instead of going over this line by line, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go over a visual representation of this, and that's this document here. I'm going to zoom in and go over the three different parts, but you can see there's one part here, one part there, and another part here. It's color coded in a certain way, and the colors are these. If it's purple, it is a responsibility of a program support or a timekeeper within the clinical service. This is all clinical service here, education is here, and the affiliate side is here. If it is blue, that is the site director role and the site director's responsibility. If it is orange, it is education support. And if it is red, it falls into the domain of the designated educational officer or the designee if there is one at the time. The key is up here, and this document should be available to you as well. But we're going to go through it, and it breaks down, like I said, into three parts: a preclinical part, a clinical part, and a post-clinical part. And we're going to go over a general overview first, and then we're going to actually review what it looks like in real time. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the preclinical phase. And I'm only going to focus today on clinical service because this is the orientation that's really designed for both program support timekeepers as well as site directors. So I might not really get into the education service area too much. Please feel free to look at it and really understand it, but it's outside of the domain of what the people who are getting this for their orientation are responsible for. So it all starts in the preclinical activity phase. This is before trainees come for an academic month. So, and the months are broken down by payment months: January, February, March, April, May, calendar months. And so prior to the residents rotating, and when I say residents, I mean residents and fellows, it is the obligation and the responsibility of program support slash timekeeper to obtain an updated clinical schedule from the affiliate prior to the beginning of the month. This is for a couple-fold. We are responsible for acquiring the schedule at the beginning of the year, but oftentimes there are changes, people can get sick, and so we need to have the most accurate representation of what the clinical schedule will look like. You can see it's purple. That's the primary responsibility of the program support timekeeper, but it's shaded in blue, which, if you recall, is the site director color. The reason that this is bicolored, essentially, is because though it's the program support timekeeper responsibility, we know that it's not possible to obtain a lot of the schedules because without the help of the site director. So please work together between the site director and the timekeeper to obtain an up-to-date clinical schedule prior to the beginning of the month. Once that schedule has been obtained, and like I said, we'll actually go through this operationally in a bit. The program support slash timekeeper's responsibility is to spot check attendance to ensure there's adherence to the schedule that we've been given. Every single program has to be evaluated minimally once a year, but for the time being and for academic year 2021, every program needs to at least have a few spot checks occurring a month. And what that means is it means that we take the preclinical schedule that we've been given, and the program support slash timekeeper physically goes to where the residents are located and identifies them within the confines of the building. They'll document that the spot check occurred and that they were present. And this is something that is required of all program support slash timekeepers that have been assigned from your clinical service. And it is subject to audit. So both of these factors, and actually every single one of these steps, is something that the Department of Education is internally auditing. This internal audit process started earlier in 2020 and will continue on through for the foreseeable future. And I would even say indefinitely. So anything that we go over here is subject to audit and is subject to ensuring that it gets done. It's the responsibility of the people that are listed. So now the program support timekeepers are responsible for spot checking every program at least once monthly, more occasionally if there's a reason to check it more often. So if the spot check occurs and we find that there's some concern, or if there's a reason that the site director is asking for more spot checks or the DEO is asking for more spot checks, this is subject to a frequency change, and that would be increased frequency. So minimally once or twice a month, but as needed, past the once or twice a month based on any reasons that the DEO, the site director, the clinical service chief will ask for it. So then the next thing that happens is kind of a joint effort between education and the program support folks, which is education is responsible for providing, and we're calling it the Baltimore tracking tool. This is the resident tracking tool that everyone is familiar with in the last several months in 2020. And the tracking tool that will be used for the foreseeable future. But so the education department, and that's this column here, will provide a blank tracking tool to the service, and it's the program support timekeeper's responsibility to ensure that it gets completed and filled out as best as they know in conjunction with both the preclinical schedule and any changes that occurred during the clinical schedule. Now, it's the responsibility of the site director to make sure that the residents and the fellows know to communicate with the timekeeper slash program support individual, whether they're sick or they come in on call or there's a change in the schedule that needs to be reflected on this. So in theory, at the time that the post-clinical phase occurs, now this is at the end of the month, the most accurate representation of what actually occurred within our building, the true resident activity, is captured within the tracking tool. And like I said, we'll go over all of this in a second, going through a specific example that I made. But so once the program support timekeeper has completed the Baltimore tracking tool, or we'll just call it the tracking tool moving forward, it is their responsibility to get this to the site director for review. Ultimately, as you can see, the final word lays with the site director, and therefore it's the responsibility of the site director to review and to sign for all attendance that's recorded here and all educational activity. But this here is a loop process that if it's 100% accurate, it can move on. But if it's not 100% accurate, it's the site director's responsibility to edit the tool as necessary and to resubmit to the program support timekeeper to verify that that it's accurate. And the reason that this exists is a couple-fold. One, it provides a nice double check within the service. So there's several double checks within the system to ensure accuracy. The other thing that it really is designed to do is if this program support if this site director notices that there's something that got missed, then their responsibility between the site director and the program support timekeeper is to address any concerns or any issues or to figure out exactly how it got messed up at this stage so that moving forward, it can be even more accurate once it arrives at this stage in subsequent months. So now that we're in the dark blue, we're talking about the site director responsibility. The site director responsibility is to really make sure that it's accurate by the time that it gets to the education office. So if it stays in this and it's 100% accurate, then we go to here, where now it's 100% accurate. The site director electronically signs the tracking tool and then sends it to the education office, where it will stay within education, hopefully the rest of its journey, but it's possible that it could come back, and we'll talk about that in a second. So the site director will electronically sign the tracking tool. And this electronic signature is something that's built into the tracking tool. If there's any issues with the tracking tool, just emailing it from your work email or an email that's associated with your name as a site director to the DEO does accomplish the goal of indicating that it's been reviewed, that it's been within the control and the evaluation of the site director and has been sent to the DEO. So that there could be some technical limitations there. And at minimum, the email with the site director signature needs to come from the site director to the DEO. Otherwise, they can sign it and have the program support person with an electronic signature send it to the DEO. That is also an option. The only major important thing is to make sure that there is some clear communication, as this shows, between the chain of command of that tracking tool to the DEO. So now that the site director has approved the tracking tool, it goes to the DEO for review. As you guys are aware, clinical schedules can be a little bit dynamic, and they can be a little bit confusing. And so there's the occasion that clarification might be required for what the tracking tool represents. If there's clarification that's required, the DEO will discuss with the site director any necessary clarification. This can be a clarification based on a full day versus a half day, a didactic and its location, who should be responsible for paying for a particular didactic. And we'll get into the more nuanced points as we go through the more bread and butter aspects of how this system works. But so there's the likelihood that if clarification is required, the tracking tool could come back to the site director, and it could once again end up in this loop to make sure that it's 100% accurate before once again going back to the DEO. But for the time being, let's go ahead and say it's completely accurate. Clarification isn't required. The DEO understands and knows all the electives and rotations, so that it's not required whatsoever. Now, this is where all the obligations within the clinical service are completed. So I'm actually going to pause here, and I'm going to go ahead and go to the actual fundamentals of what occurs after. I'm actually going to go through an example and walk through this process using an example that I made. The rest of this is all here. You can see that there's some ultimately it comes down to a payment gets made down here, but this is to ensure that there's 100% accuracy. The last thing that could potentially involve the site directors or the clinical services is that a clarification is needed from the financial tech side or the administrative officer side, and it could come back to the DEO for that clarification. If the DEO needs further clarification, it could come back to the site director. The major point here is that communication between the DEO, the program support, the site director, and the administrative officer all needs to be pretty good in order to make sure that this system works in the way that it's designed to. So we're going to go ahead and move on to an example that I made. So give me 1 second and I'll load up a pre-schedule. Okay, so let's go ahead and work through this example. So what we have here is we have the cardiology schedule, and this is a sample schedule. This doesn't represent an actual schedule that's occurred, but a cardiology sample for the month of February of the year 2020. So this is a pre-schedule. So when we talk about what we just went over, is we're actually now here in this stage, that it's acquiring the schedule, and this is where the program support timekeeper works with the site director to make sure that they have the most accurate schedule of what's to come for the month following. So I've zoomed it in quite a bit, but you can see that this has the whole month here. So from 1 to 29, this was a leap year, and so we'll go ahead and go through this very quickly. So the reason I chose cardiology as an example is because it represents a couple fold. Cardiology is a really nice program in the fact that it's a great example program. It has inpatient rotations, that's the cardiology consult fellow. It has outpatient rotations, meaning it's got cardiology clinic fellow, and they can have clinic both here and at UC. Our program here is really dynamic and actually has fellows that come once or twice a month to do their continuity clinic here. And then the other thing that it's got is it has off-service residents that also do rotation. So this would be like your medicine residents that come and do an elective in cardiology, and they would be consult. It has Monday through Friday rotations, and that's classic workday rotation. And it also has full month rotations, and that would be a consult rotation. So this is the schedule in advance, and we'll go over just very quick a couple examples of what the schedule looks like. So inpatient consult here, fellow, you can see this is a fellow that's scheduled every single day here except for one ACGME mandated day off. Now, the most important takeaway is that the actual calculation of how much we pay and how the calculations work is not in the scope of either the program director or the site director or the timekeeper or the program support. That really does fall within the domain of the education office. But it's really important to know what's reimbursable and what's not reimbursable. And the tracking tool is really designed to streamline that process. But ultimately, it comes down to anything that's our responsibility, that they were scheduled here, that they performed academic service here, or that they were scheduled here and they learned here. That's really our responsibility to pay. Sick days we also pay, and we'll get into that as we go into the more specifics of what the tracker looks like. But so what we're going to do is we're going to actually go over the cardiology sample schedule here. So prior to the scheduled month is that there was an inpatient fellow that was scheduled. There was an inpatient EP or electrophysiology fellow that was scheduled, and then 2 clinic fellows that were scheduled. And you can see that here there was only an AM schedule of the cardiology clinic fellow here, and then VA Echo Fellow 5 is that there's a fellow that's here for half the time and then not scheduled the rest of the time. So this implies in this particular schedule that the VA Echo Fellow is elsewhere for the other 2 days of the week, and that's what we call a split rotation. But long story short is that all it comes down to is that we only really care about what they're doing here. There are some caveats within the domains of education that change that a small bit, but realistically for our tracking purposes, it's only who is supposed to be here when they're supposed to be here. You can also see that IM residents are scheduled here again and again and again, and they're a Monday through Friday rotation. And then there are some covering fellows that aren't on the schedule per se, and they're in yellow here. Inpatient Consult Fellow 6 is scheduled to cover Inpatient Consult Fellow 1 when it's their ACGME mandated day off. And so this is a sample schedule that we have. So we're going to work through this schedule as we go through the rest of the examples. Okay, everybody. So now that we've obtained the schedule, we're going to actually go through what the clinical activity phase looks like. So this is the program support / timekeeper's responsibility, and it's their responsibility to make sure that the preclinical schedule is what is accurate and what's being followed, and that any changes that get made they're aware of and are reflected. Okay, so now here we are. We're going to go over February 2020 in real time, in theory. So this is now what the program support person or the timekeeper is doing, is they have the previous schedule that was given. And what it ultimately comes down to is you can see that Inpatient Consult Fellow 1 was here all these days. Inpatient 1 fellow, Inpatient 1 fellow, Inpatient 1 fellow. But here, you can see that the spot check occurred. They were present on this day. The resident actually called and said that they would be off because they're going to be working on nights at the affiliate. This IM resident was spot checked to be present there. You can see that this Echo Fellow was present, but the staff was sick. You can see that IM resident 2 here was not in-house those days and informed the timekeeper that they were pulled. But also this was picked up on a spot check that they weren't here. And then you can see that that there was Echo Fellow 5 here wasn't present there. Echo Fellow 5 there wasn't present. And you can see that what it comes down to, Echo IM resident 1 here called in sick. And so you can see that this is really a living, breathing representation of what's actually happening throughout the month. And so it really is mandatory that the program support and the timekeeper and to some very large extent the site director all work together to make sure that we capture real in-house activity as it's going on. And this is just a very quick sample of something that I made to show what it should look like. Is that there are some spot checks, there's some attendance that they were pulled to the affiliate, there were some people that ended up calling in sick, and you can see. And now the next step that we'll go over is we'll go over the actual tracking tool and how to capture all of this into the formal tool that's been created by the Department of Education to ensure that we are the most compliant that we possibly can be with the directives that the Office of Academic Affiliation and our facility have to follow. Okay, everybody. So now let's go over what this actually looks like and go over what the various codes represent and why the codes are put in the way that they are. So now we're at this stage, which is the program support / timekeeper completes and submits to the site director the tracking tool with all resident and clinical activities. This is still the responsibility of the program support / timekeeper. And so let's go ahead and take a look at what that actually means. So this is a cleaned up version of the spot check in the program support version of the ongoing clinical schedule as it gets edited. I did this mostly because my handwriting is pretty terrible, and I didn't want to create any issues with the way that my handwriting looks, and that's really all that it comes down to. I color coded it a bit to indicate that anything that's in green here, the fellow was at UC to try to draw attention to, or at the affiliate. Anything that's shaded is some special case, and we'll go over those cases as we go through this process. So now the way that this works, and we've gone through this now several times in a lot of our GME meetings, but I wanted to get this down in a video recording and make sure that everyone understands it, is that all of these things, all of these didactics, or whether they're away or whether they're sick, all relate to various codes that are in the tracking tool. So let's go ahead and go over some of the codes at the same time that we go over how to translate this, the actual clinical schedule that occurred, into this, the tracking tool that will ultimately have to be right in order to pay the invoice. So the tracking tool has a few different aspects to it. One, it's a name, last name, first name. 2, it's a PGY level. And 3, it's a visa status. The reason that these things exist is because we have to track these from OAA, but there's a good reason that we do that. In the background, there's calculations that happen in PGY, and effectively trainees in the institutions that they come from, the affiliates, get paid a little bit more as residents become more experienced. Their stipend goes up, and therefore their daily rates or the amount that we pay goes up. A little outside the confines of this conversation, but that's why that all happens. And then visa status also relates to a payment issue. So out of the confines of the education, the clinical world, but this is absolutely mandatory for it to be in there for the tracker to be 100% accurate. So now let's go over some of the codes before we actually start to track. So some of the most obvious ones, and we'll go over the most common codes before we get into anything else. So the reimbursable codes that are essentially clinical work are these. They worked a full day. That's a simple X. They worked a weekend. And this really is designed for people who aren't scheduled to be here that come down and work a weekend in coverage. The W and the X effectively work the same way. So if you don't remember that, it's not a big deal. You could put a W where an X should be in it if it's a weekend. That's fine. This DH is a didactic. And the reason that this is really designed this way is DH specifically is a didactic that's a half a day where they're working here in-house, DH, didactic half day, and then they go away for a half day as well. This bills at a full day, but implies that they were at the University of Cincinnati or at the affiliate for the other half a day. So that's why this code is specifically listed like that. If they were in-house for half a day and then had a didactic for half a day here in-house, there's no reason to use this code because this code really allows for payment and also tells where they were. You would just use this full day present. They were here for a full day. And this, like I said, includes in-house didactics. Um, the other things that could come up for payment is if they came in call, if they were scheduled not here and they came from University of Cincinnati or the affiliate and worked down here and they came in on call, then you use this came in on call schedule and worked greater than 4 hours or less than 4 hours. That's C4 for came in on call and stayed less than 4 hours, or C8 came in on call and stayed greater than 4 hours. If a clinic is closed for whatever reason and it's a full day clinic that they were scheduled, then it's a CC8 code, meaning that clinic was closed for all 8 hours of the workday. Or if it's just a half a day that they were scheduled, it's CC4, clinic closed for half day schedule. Everything is pretty straightforward, and we tried to make it that way. But so it comes down to understanding these codes and knowing when to use them is really critical when it comes down to ensuring the highest level of fidelity in the system that's been created. So the other codes that come up is a sick day, and the reason it's up here is because we do pay for sick leave. So it's a sick day here. Federal holidays, there are several federal holidays that come up. We'll pay for that, but it has to be tracked that a federal holiday that they were scheduled to work that day and it was a federal holiday. That's an FH. And then research, we pay research as long as they're on site and doing research within the VA. If they're on a research month and doing research off site on a VA protocol, we'll also pay for that. And that's an R, and that's a full day research. And it must include the VA protocol if they're doing research off site. If they're doing research in house, you could even put the X full day present, but R is also here for you. And then just specify that it was in house. Half-day research is the same type of deal. So all of these half-day codes relate to some full-day code that exists. If they worked for half a day and they had to go home sick, that's SH. If they worked for half a day and took the other half a day as annual leave, that's AH. Like I said, clinic closed is a half day. Is a half day scheduled, and the clinic was closed that day, and then H is half day present. Other codes that are allowed to be chosen is O, is an other. So just go ahead and put other, and then put in what the reason is for the comments. Annual leave needs to be tracked. It's a non-reimbursable code, but it needs to be put in. And there's been a little bit of confusion with N, and I wanted to clarify this. N is really when they were scheduled, but they weren't present. It's not designed for residents who aren't supposed to be here, who aren't here, which is how it's been used. N is really designed to capture things like a spot check occurred and they weren't here, and now an N falls into place where they should have been present. And then D is a full day didactic at UC, but also at an affiliate if you're using one of these that are designed for children's or else like that. So now that we've gone over the codes, and understanding the codes is really the responsibility of the program director, the site director, the program support, the timekeeper, because everyone is actively manipulating and verifying the accuracy of this. So let's go ahead and move to our example, our real life example, our fake real life example, and translate this into what this looks like. So we'll go ahead and work through 1 week together, and then I'll come back and have the rest of it blown in, and then I might show you some of these special cases. But so this tracker is designed to be really straightforward and really easy to use with minimal amount of commitment when it comes to time. And what I mean by that is, we can take a look here. Let's go and take a look at Inpatient Fellow 1. Inpatient Fellow 1, you can see, was present all of the first 6 days, in fact, 7 days of the month. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it all comes down to just typing in X into those first 7 days. And we're all done with Inpatient 1. Inpatient Fellow 1. We could take a look here, and if we wanted to continue across the line, Inpatient Fellow 6 covered that weekend day. So we can go here to Inpatient Fellow 6, put a W there. Now let's go ahead and go to the next one. EP Fellow 2 was here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So that's as easy as this. So EP Fellow 2, EP Clinic Fellow 3 is here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So let's go ahead and do this. Clinic Fellow 4 was here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then worked a half a day, as you can see, at UC. So Cards Clinic Fellow 4, offsite and PM, continuity clinic, no reciprocal fellow. That all that means is that the fellow went away for a continuity clinic. We don't generally reimburse continuity clinics. There is a caveat that if someone gets sent down here for a continuity clinic, we will reimburse at that point. That's what it's meant by the reciprocal fellow. But generally speaking, we don't reimburse continuity clinics away. And in fact, in academic year 2021, the formal change from OAA is occurring that we will not reimburse away continuity clinics. So now Echo Fellow 5, I'm sorry, we're still at Echo Fellow 4. You can see full day, and then half day. So that's as simple as that. So you see the H is for half day worked, half day present. And now let's go ahead and look at Echo Fellow 5. So you can see Echo Fellow 5 was here Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then I highlighted in green that they were at UC Echo Fellow 5. This is what we call a true split rotation, where they're doing rotations here and they're doing rotations at UC, but the resident or the fellow elective is for essentially the category of echo learning, echocardiography. So for this, we're just going to go ahead and put Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Oh, and there you go. And that's all for Echo Fellow 5. Echo Fellow 7, it doesn't appear in this week, so we can leave that Echo Fellow 7 here. Now let's go and look at IM Resident 1. So IM Resident 1 here was they worked, and then they were off. They had to take an ACG mandated day off because they end up working at UC, which isn't reflected on this chart. But because they weren't here this day, we don't put that on the tracker, even though, if you'll recall, initially they were scheduled to work that day, but it was later found out that they weren't required to be here, or that they actually weren't here. So let's go ahead and put that in. And you can see that IM Elective Resident 1 is tracked here. And then IM Resident 2 appeared all 5 days, so they were present all day. And ultimately, it's tracking these fellows and residents is as simple as this. During the actual putting in the schedule, putting in the codes, the subtotals are being calculated. That really is to it's for education purposes. The most important reason that the most important thing to really make sure that occurs is that the stuff here, the actual academic activity, is accurate from both the program director, the site director, the program support, and the timekeeper. All of this stuff, it's outside the purview of what you're responsible for, but it really does kind of track the various parameters for the Department of Education. So let's go ahead, and before we move on from this specific example, I want to go over some common scenarios. So this one has an in-house didactic. You can see it. All 10 cardiology fellows come to the VA, and here all 10 in-house another didactic where all 10 fellows come to the VA. So actually this shows me that I probably so let me show you this. So in-house didactic, so they were here. Fellow 1 was a full day present, including in-house didactic. So why isn't Fellow 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 on here? Because there are some other fellows who were in the building and had a didactic. The reason that they're not listed here is because they weren't assigned here. So the idea is that we only pay a proportional share of didactics, whether they occur here. We only pay a proportional share of the didactics when they occur here. If our residents are scheduled here and go away to UC, we pay the didactics there, obviously. And so that's one thing that I wanted to point out, because that comes up occasionally, is that we're only really paying the didactic of the proportional share of our fellows and our residents. And we have no problem with that. If we're supposed to be paying, we should be paying. And then the other couple things, we'll go over a couple quick unique circumstances here. So let's just go over this. Here you can see on the 10th of February, the Echo Fellow showed up, but the attending was sick. So that would actually be a CC8 because they were scheduled the whole day here. The staff was sick, and we can say here in the remarks, because it requires the remarks, Echo Fellow was present, but staff sick and then Dr. Echo was the staff member. And that's really, this has to be put in because they didn't work clinically, but we're still going to pay, so it has to be tracked. A couple other quick things that are in here that will just show you how they work is here, it looks like I am resident called in sick there. So that would be 12 would be I am resident is sick here, and they were scheduled for a full day, so that's sick leave. They were pulled to UC I am resident 2, you can see here, and they were scheduled to be here, so that's why we have the N codes, for instance. Inpatient consult fellow here, unfortunately, was sick on the 20th. Looks like there might be some bug going around. So sick leave there. And then once again, I am resident fellow sick here. They called in and they called the timekeeper and made sure that the timekeeper was aware there. And then a couple other quick things that pop up is here. There was an affiliate didactic, meaning that they went away for a half day of didactic. And so a couple special circumstances that will happen is that 14 and 28 are fellows that were supposed to be scheduled here were actually at the didactic at UC. So let's go ahead and list those as didactic half day. Notice Echo Fellow 5 is not listed because they weren't scheduled here that day. Echo Fellow 1 was scheduled, 2, 3, and 4 were all scheduled. But Echo Fellow 5 was not scheduled to be here, therefore we wouldn't pay. Once again on the 28th, let's go ahead and go through that. And so, yep, it's designed where you can't put in codes that don't exist. So there you go. And then once again, Echo Fellow 5 is left off because they were scheduled at UC that day. So that's a really quick sample of how to fill it in. We're now going to go over the next step. So all of this has been the responsibility of the program coordinator slash timekeeper. So now we're going to get into the responsibility of the site director. Okay, so now the program support timekeeper has completed all of the tracking tool and is ready to be reviewed by the site director. So now we're at this stage. The site director has obtained a filled out version, and the question is it 100% accurate or is it not? So let's go ahead and go through that process really quick. So this is the final schedule that we were talking about, and this is the tracker that the site director gets. So let's go ahead and take a look. So the site director may have their own records, and Rob really should have their own records as well, just as a double check of where the fellows were, what was going on, or they should have been told by, for instance, their supervising physician, hey, this fellow or this resident didn't show up, and there should be some level of tracking that occurs there. As we talked about in the orientation, is that we don't expect the site director to do this alone. We expect the site director, the program support, the timekeeper, all staff supervising physicians who have all trainees to really work in conjunction to make sure that this is accurate. But so now let's go ahead and say that this is what was sent from the program support slash timekeeper to the site director. Okay. Now I've highlighted a couple things here in red, and that's to really draw our attention to a few things. So let's go ahead and take a look. So let's say this is what was sent by the timekeeper. And for this purposes, we're sticking with cardiology. So the cardiology timekeeper has submitted this to the site director, and the site director is reviewing this for accuracy. So the first thing we do is we take a look and we say, okay, inpatient fellow 1, and the site director probably knows that the inpatient fellow 1 was sick one day because they were told by the staff supervising physician that there needed some coverage. So they're already really aware of the fact that there's a sick day that has to be accounted for in there. So taking a look here, you can see that there's no sick day for inpatient fellow 1. And the staff physician or the site director is aware that for one reason or another, there has to be a sick day because she or he knows that the fellow was called in sick. So this is designed to draw our attention to it. So, but you can see the 20th, there was a sick day that was actually missed by the program coordinator. And so the site director's responsibility is to come back and change this to sick leave. Okay, going through some of these other examples, it looks like cardiology fellow 4 on this day here it was checked as a full day, but the site director knows that that wasn't a full day for cardiology fellow 4. It was they worked a half day here and they worked a half day at University of Cincinnati. So they changed this to an H. And then Echo Fellow 5 here. We know that this was a split rotation as we talked about before. And so it looks like here, and actually there's a mistake. So clinic closed wasn't on the 3rd, clinic closed was on the 10th. So we actually will say, oh, this is not correct. So there, and then clinic closed was on the 10th. As you can see, this was what was recorded in the final schedule. So this gets changed to the 10th here. And then here, drawing our attention to inpatient fellow 6, we know that this rotation is a split rotation. So the site director takes a look at this and says it doesn't make any sense that they would be here that day. It's possible that the Echo Fellow came and covered one of the inpatient services, and that's why this X exists. And the site director will check with the program coordinator and the timekeeper to find out what the story is with this X. And it turns out that was just a simple mistake. It wasn't supposed to be in there. So they erase this. And then looking at inpatient fellow 6, you can see that inpatient fellow 6 actually did work here on a day that they weren't scheduled to work, or that they were scheduled to work, but this wasn't captured by the site director, and so inpatient fellow 6 gets added here as a weekend worked. I put an X, but like I said, it could be an X or a W, but really the W is designed for this exact reason. Someone came and covered when they weren't scheduled here, so that's a weekend worked there. And then I am elective resident 1 to verify. We know that they were sick here one day and there one day, and that was captured. Sick on the 12th, sick on the 26th, and the site director is aware of it, and they check to see if the sick leave is captured. And then you can see all the federal holidays are filled in. This was President's Day, I believe, and Fellow 5 was scheduled to work that day, but was lucky enough to have the day off and did not work at UC. So that's why federal holiday is given for Echo Fellow 5, for instance. Here, ends, you can see these ends, is they were scheduled to work but not present. So N, N, N. And this could be either the site director picked up on this. They were told by the trainee that they weren't going to be in that day for whatever reason. So, and they were scheduled. So there's where the ends come. So now the site director has reviewed this. They've looked at it and it's completely right. So let's go ahead and take these off to no longer focus and show you what those are, to really highlight that. And then let's go ahead and go through the next step. So the next step for, ignore the color change, I'll fix that later. But so the next step for the site director is to make sure that this is right. And they've gone through the process where they've talked to the program coordinator. They've done this. They said, hey, I saw that there was a sick day. It wasn't captured. Does that sound right to you? Yeah, it sounds right to me. And it's now 100% accurate. So it reconciles against the true schedule that exists. So this reflects this, which is the actual schedule, the actual attendance, the actual academic records that occurred. So now we're going to go ahead here, and it's ready to be signed. So the site director says, yeah, this looks good. Like I said, you can ignore this stuff here. If you're interested to see how this whole thing works, is it just tabulates all these various full days. The one thing that site directors sometimes do ask me about is this half day didactic. And the way that the DH, a didactic, which to reiterate is a half day here, half day at the affiliate, is designed as it captures 2 half days actually, and it puts it within half day variables there. And then it adds up, and then it basically outputs a number. And what it outputs is a little bit outside the scope of the site director, but and also the program support person. But so now the site director says, yeah, this looks right. I'm 100% sure this is right. Okay, so what happens is the site director goes here and they say, okay, I'm ready to sign this. So you click here, you click the right tab mouse here, or you can click view signatures there. And then you can say, okay, I'm signing for the site director. So I'm going to click it and I'm going to sign it. And excuse this because I'm going to sign for me, but I'm signing it as my Sarguelli, and then I'm signing it as accurate. As soon as it's signed, you say it's accurate. Yeah, we'll go ahead and sign that. And then here we go. That's been you see my name is there. I'm ready to save this. So now go ahead and save here, and then I saved it as almost final. We'll go ahead and save it as final this time. So saved here, and then let's go ahead and make sure. Okay, so even I'm having a little bit of a technical issue with the signature. I don't really know why that happened, but as long as I take this document as the site director and I send this to the DEO, it shows that there's a clear chain of command from this final version. I'm saying this looks good to me, signature or no signature, and it's ready to go. Okay, going back one quick second to the signature page. So like I said, you could send this as the site director straight to the DEO, but I also wanted to show you why you might run into problems with the signature block, which I just ran into, and I think that I might have figured it out. But I'm doing this in real time, so if it doesn't figure it out, please excuse me. But what I'm looking here is I'm looking to see what it's being signed as. So I'm going back and I'm going to click here. You can right click or you can go over to here and go to the sign button there. But I'm going to right click and say sign, ready to sign. And then it says signing as. And I'm going to change this to make sure that this is my card that's in the reader. And this is my card right here. So I'm going to go ahead and say sign it as this. And then I'm going to type my name into there. And I'm signing it. It's under my card, which is in the reader. And now I'm clicking sign. And we'll see if this works. So it's asking for my code there. I'm going to go ahead and put my code in here. Okay, and it looks like it says that my signature has been successfully saved on this document. If the document is changed, your signature will become invalid. And that's really designed to do that. So you would do this as the site director. Unfortunately, I couldn't, the first time I did it, which you saw, it didn't save it, but it looked like it was simply a function of what it was trying to attach to when it came to Excel. But now I'm able to save this. Let's go ahead and just save this as final. I'm ready to overwrite this. And then, yeah, I'm going to save a copy. It's just saying, there we go. And now you can see that it's signed. And it might say invalid signature, or it might say, as long as your name is here and it says signature and it's signed, then it's 100% fine. And there we go. So this is ready to be sent to the DEO. The last piece of the puzzle is that the DEO will review it. And they'll review it to make sure that it looks feasible, that it looks right. Obviously, the DEO doesn't know exactly what the rotations are and what it looked like we talked about before. So there's a good chance that they might have to send it back to say, hey, is this right? Was this a full day? Was this a half day? Was this didactic here? Was this didactic away? Is there any clarification that's needed? Hopefully, a lot of the comment section gets used to kind of clarify that. But once it's set, then the DEO will say, okay, the service is all done with it. And then the last time the service might get involved is if a clarification is needed as it's being reconciled against the final billing statement from the University of Cincinnati, in which case it could still come back to being asked here. So that's about it. That's the process. That's the standard operating procedure that we went over. And like I said, the only thing that we're really concerned about is making sure that services understand this part of the process here, the clinical services. All of this stuff should be available to review and to understand and to manipulate and to play around with. So if there's any questions, though, please feel free to reach out to the Department of Education to answer any questions that might come up. The Department of Education has worked really hard to make sure that we do the best that we can to ensure compliance with the rules and regulations that we have to follow. And by doing this and by having the program support, the timekeeper, and the site director all working together with the Department of Education, we can continue to provide a really dynamic, robust, really exciting educational environment for our trainees. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and this will fulfill the criteria for the annual training on reconciliation. Thank you again, and have a good day.